Thank you for joining me for this short presentation on relational schemas in the family, a theory created by Mary Anne Fitzpatrick and her colleagues nearly 30 years ago. I don't think anyone would argue the value of the family in the support of an individual. Anita Evangelisti is another scholar who said that family communication shapes how we interact in virtually every context of our lives. Research has shown us that communication support is key to the health and well-being of an individual. Other research shows that family connections bear weight on the individual's sense of satisfaction and success. There's no question that an individual's first basic knowledge of communication happens within the family unit. So yes, studying family communication is valuable. The question that I want to answer today is Mary Anne Fitzpatrick's theory on relational schemas still valid? Does it still work for us, even though it was created in the mid-80s? Let me give you just the essence of the family schema theory. First of all, as I said, it was developed in the mid-80s by Mary Anne Fitzpatrick and her colleagues, and her research actually began by studying marital relationships, the communication dynamics between a husband and a wife. And from there, it developed into studying how those marriage types affected family units as a whole. Littlejohn and Foss, in their book, talk about the theory this way. They say that the theory provides a set of terms to describe different family types and to explain the differences among them. It's pretty straightforward, so as you can see, there aren't a lot of difficult phrases, words, terminology to understand. This is just a solid theory about different family types. The way that Fitzpatrick comes up with these different family types is she takes two communication orientations. Are you more orientated toward conversation or toward conformity? And then she crosses those two with her different marriage styles that she came up with through her research. And from those, then there are 4 different family types or family schemas that are created. So let's talk about the 2 communication orientations to start. First of all, there's conformity orientation. In conformity orientation, you see shared values, beliefs, and even behaviors taking place in the family. It's understood that the children obey the parents, that the parents are the authority figure in the family. And so even though conversation does happen, at the end of the day, the parents define the social reality for the entire family. On the other hand, in conversation orientation, communication is open, it's free, it's frequent. Any topic can be discussed at any time, at any length. And there's mutual respect. This means that it doesn't matter if it's the parent or the child who bring up an opinion, everyone is going to be heard. Now take these 2 orientations and cross them with her marriage styles, the first being traditional. In the traditional style, you see a marriage that most consider to be stable. The couple is very interdependent. This means that they spend a lot of their time together. They have shared activities that they enjoy doing together. And in that, too, they have this mutual understanding of role responsibilities. This means that the wife has things that she's responsible for, and the husband has things that he's responsible for. And they mutually respect those things. They understand each other in those things. This means that there's actually very little conflict that takes place in the traditional marriage. If they both know what it is that they're supposed to be responsible for, and they do those things, what is there to argue about? This marriage stands on honesty, respect, and trustworthiness. The second type of marriage is independent. Unlike the traditional style, this couple is very autonomous. This means that they like their space. They have separate activities that they enjoy doing separately, and they're both okay with that. This marriage type can seem rather unconventional, or at least it did upon its inception. But this marriage type also sees a bit more conflict than the first type. And the reason for this is because they don't have those issued role responsibilities. They don't have the understanding of you're to do this and I'm to do that. They kind of do their own thing. This means that they have to continue to come back and renegotiate what their roles are in the marriage. They have to continue to talk about it, which means that there's going to be some conflict. The third type of marriage then is separate. And you're going to see a little bit of traditional here, a little bit of independent, but you're also going to see a separate identity altogether. Traditionally speaking, they may have this idea that there are role responsibilities. However, there's this independent piece where they kind of do their own thing, and so they don't talk about those role responsibilities very much. In fact, They're rather ambivalent toward their marriage. Quite simply, they just don't care. And so what this means is they're actually referred to often as emotionally divorced. They live together, they do some things together, but for the most part, they're very individual people. There's little trust, there's little conversation, which means there's actually a lot of conflict in this marriage type. Now you can do the math. If you cross the different communication orientations with these three types of marriage, you can probably figure out the kinds of family units that are going to come out of them. But very quickly, let me just highlight a few things. First, we have the consensual family. In this family, you're going to see that they're both high on conversation and conformity. The marriage type, the parents in this marriage are probably traditional, and this means that they value open communication. They want to talk about things with their kids, but everybody knows that at the end of the day, the parents still are the authority figure. They're going to make the ultimate decision. So there's that conformity piece playing out. The second type of family is pluralistic in nature. This means that they're high in conversation, but low in conformity. Not surprising, the marriage type in this family unit is independent in style. Because the parents appreciate and value their independence from each other, they want the same thing for their children. They want their children to be independent, to make their own decisions, those kinds of things. They still openly communicate. They value communication very much. They hear everybody's opinion, but at the end of the day, it's not the parents' decision that rules. They expect everybody to make their own choices. The third type of family is protective in nature. This family is low in conversation, but high in conformity. Typically, you're going to see a marriage style of separates in this family. So what this means is there's strict obedience expected, but there's little explanation given. They assume that their children will understand these are the beliefs and values of our family, and they'll act accordingly. But the parents don't feel like they have to explain those to their kids. They don't feel like there's a conversation needed. And the final family type is laissez-faire. This family is low in both conversation and conformity. Parents in this family type are typically mixed in their marriage style. So you may have one independent and one separate. This means that their personalities are going to clash. This means that their communication styles are going to clash. And that feeds over into the children. The parents are very much hands-off in this type of family relationship. They have very low involvement in their kids' lives. And this means that the children are going to be making their own decisions. But unlike the pluralistic family, where at least the children do have input from their parents, there's no conversation happening in the laissez-faire family. Children are making their own decisions, maybe only with the help of peers. So you can imagine in the laissez-faire family, and even some in the protective family, there's a lot of disintegration happening within this family unit. Now, here's the thing. In the mid-'80s, it was probably a lot easier to look at any family and say, oh, clearly you're a pluralistic family type, or obviously you're consensual in your family. But time has marched on. Culture has changed. Trends are different, and it's a lot more difficult to look at a square family now and expect that family to fit into one of these round holes. Things have changed within the family unit. To emphasize this, I'm going to read a quote from Rodney Clapp in his work, Family at the Crossroads. He says it this way: "Scant decades ago, most Westerners agreed that lifelong monogamy was ideal, that mothers would stay home with their children, that premarital sex was to be discouraged, that heterosexuality was the unquestioned norm, and that popular culture would not corrupt children. Today, not a single one of these expectations is uncontroversial." The American Psychological Association goes on to tell us that 40 to 50% of U.S. marriages will end in divorce, and the divorce rate of subsequent marriage is even higher than that. The family once looked like father, mother, two children. They may have had different ways of communicating, but they looked similarly. Today, there could be stepchildren, step-parents, half-siblings, adopted children, foster children. The parents could be single. The parents could be grandparents. The parents could be gay or lesbian. The list goes on and on. So because the family looks so different than it did 30 years ago, the question is, while Fitzpatrick's work was groundbreaking then, is it still relevant for us today? Does it work? Through my research that I have conducted, I would say yes. I would argue that it absolutely still stands today, that it will work in evaluating family dynamics and communication styles. And I want to give you a few reasons why. First of all, through all of her research, Fitzpatrick has associated with other top scholars in her field. This means that she has looked at others' research, their studies, their findings, and she said, hey, that works, let's pull that in and work from that. It means she's smart. She sees if something works, then don't change it, just work with it. And that has given her huge validation in her theory. Secondly, if you look at her family schemas, particularly if you look at the consensual family and the pluralistic family, you see that those two families are very different, but you see that they can have similar outcomes. These two families are functioning in different communication styles, and yet they still have solid, rich relationships. What this means is that even 30 years ago, Fitzpatrick was allowing for family diversity. She saw the need to recognize differences. And so even though those differences may be even more now, that doesn't mean that her theory is completely off base. Third, she has adopted a more transactional definition of family. Whereas in her early research and early writings, you would see her definition of family as this: a unit bound together by legal or biological ties. If you read some of her more recent writings, she's developed and accepted a more transactional definition, and here's what it would say now. A group of intimates who generate a sense of home and group identity, and to experience a shared history and future. So clearly, as time has changed, as the family dynamic has changed, she has seen that and she has adapted right along with it. That's a good sign for a solid theory. Also, it's not just her definition that has grown and changed. Her research overall has as well. She has adapted and evolved with culture and with time. And the way that you can see that is if you look at more recent theories and newer scholars in the area of family communication. They are still quoting Mary Anne Fitzpatrick. They are citing her. They are looking at her as a leader in their field. And if the scholars in this field trust her, there is no reason why we should not. And finally, and maybe most importantly, the reason why I think this theory still stands is because Fitzpatrick has always studied origins over outcomes. Whereas other scholars would look at this behavior plus this behavior equals this behavior, they're always looking at the outcome that comes out of a relationship. Mary Anne Fitzpatrick has been studying what goes into the relationship. This conversational versus conformity type of communication process. It doesn't matter how much time has gone on or how many things have changed in the family dynamic. That communication orientation is always going to be there. That origin is always going to stand. And so, it's my conclusion that due to her focus on the origins of family communication, as well as the emphasis placed on the effects of marriage on the family unit, Mary Anne Fitzpatrick's theory on relational schemas in the family is as current and valuable to familial studies today as it was upon its inception. I hope that this presentation has been helpful to you, that you find the information helpful as you continue to study interpersonal relationships, especially when you study the relationship that is foundational to every individual, that of the family. Thank you.